This time we'll turn it over to Dr. Simpson, who will share with us the plan for the school bond issue and also to explain in detail the minute points related to that. So.
Thank you, Dennis. If I don't get too much feedback, I'm going to walk down here. I'm going to grab a quick drink of water. Talk for a little while. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. This community is special to all of you, and each of you it's special in a different way. And I appreciate that. I've been here for 3 years as superintendent. I have tried to understand some of the challenges, and I've tried to work where we can produce the best possible students that can make this community proud. And doing that is not free. It is free to the parents because it is public education, but it is not free to the taxpayers. But one thing that I want to mention is, at the end of the day, I truly believe that education is an investment, not a cost. And that mindset is what leads me to the job that I do every day. And so thinking of it as an investment instead of a cost puts us in a position where we can look at our investment and take it forward. And now I want to talk a little bit. First of all, we talk about one plan, one purpose, one district. And you've seen that around town some. I'll explain that in a little bit. But when we talked about a bond issue and the package that we were trying to put together, we developed some objectives. And the first thing is to begin a maintenance plan for our buildings. We have been forced, because we have not had successful bond issues, and we have old buildings, and we have growth, we have been forced into a plan that is reactive, not proactive. And that has put us in a position where when we react, we're always reacting instead of being out in front of our challenges. The next part is to develop a plan to address our overcrowding of our classrooms. If the original mandates of House Bill 1017, the Education Reform Act from the early 1990s, were put back in place today, which there's debate that will happen when education funding returns to its 2008 amount, we would be penalized almost $1 million for this district per year. And the reason for that is our classes are overcrowded. And it's not a matter of hiring more teachers. We don't have classrooms for them to teach in. And so we have to, and that has nothing to do with addressing future growth that we know is coming if you drive around outside of the city limits of Guthrie. The next thing, reduce time students spend on a school bus. Our earliest student gets on a bus at 6:06 a.m. And the reasons for that, a lot of it is geographic. Our growth is not near our schools. And because of that, and because of some of the challenges with our roads and things that many of you are very familiar with, we have to start very early. The students that live nearest to the land that we have recently purchased, their average board time in the morning is between 6:20 and 6:40 every morning. I live fairly close to town. I live in Mission Hills. Our bus picks our kids up if they rode. She's not, we don't put her on the bus because she's pre-K. She's a little young for that. She would get on the bus at 6:30 in the morning. That's not that far from town. But part of the issue also is when that bus gets to town, there are 6 schools that it has to drop kids off at. And if you've driven through town in the morning or in the afternoon, you see that we've created our own traffic jam with our school buses, because all 6 schools have to be touched by every bus. But by going to neighborhood schools, it reduces by at least 2 the number of schools that a bus has to drop kids off at or pick them up in the afternoon. Ease in-town traffic congestion, what I just talked about as well. Again, going to neighborhood schools allows us to not send buses to as many different schools. Eliminate the need for portable classrooms. That's a goal. Notice I said it's a goal. The issues that we have at Cotterell, for instance, we have 8 portable classrooms. Most of those buildings were purchased in 1986 surplus from Edmond Public Schools. That's where we're putting students at Cotterell. And just so that you kind of have a framework of the timeline of that, I'm giving some confessions here. That's the same year that I graduated from high school. That's when the used portable buildings were placed at Cotterell. Why does our community need this? Well, the first reason is history. When you look at 2005, the last bond issue that we passed, when we built on to Cotterell, we built on to Central and Fogarty, and we renovated Jelsma Stadium. That was the last bond issue that passed. Since 2012, we have had no sinking fund, no bond debt. And so anything that we do is going to be a tax increase. And then what else has changed since 2005, the last bond issue we passed? This is our growth. We were at about 3,200 students in 2005, and we're now close to 3,600 students. That growth there's no end in sight if you drive through these neighborhoods. And I'll show you some aerials to demonstrate that. Woodland Farms is a neighborhood this is Douglas Boulevard, and this is north of Waterloo Road. This is in our school district. This is what that neighborhood looked like in 2005. And that's what it looks like today. Sweetwater Springs was just starting in 2005, and that's the first phase of it right there. And that's what it looks like today, and I can assure you, because I've driven it, these neighborhoods right here, you can tell there are streets, those are full of houses, and if they are not occupied, the sign out in front of it usually says sold. It is built up. Charter Oak Estates, this is just north of Sweetwater Springs. That's what it looked like in 2005. They're starting to clear land and get ready to pave for streets. That's what it looks like today. And you can see more construction going on out here. And again, these pictures are from 2014. This is Triple Crown Meadows, which is, we're getting a little closer to town now. This is Pine, and it is north of Seward Road. That's what it looks like today. All of this since we passed our last bond issue. Okay, Mission Hills, Pleasant Hills. This is Mission Hills, and this is an apartment complex called Pleasant Hills. Again, this is inside the city limits of Guthrie. And you can see the growth that's happened there. So, we look at funding options to meet our needs. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a school funding lesson. I'm always a teacher, and so I can't resist to do that. When you look at our building fund, this is the money that we have set aside by the state constitutionally to maintain our buildings and to do work on our buildings. And this is an annual, this is what it looks like approximately every year. And this grows as our property assessment grows, but it doesn't grow enough to adequately provide for our buildings. We get about $640,000 a year in building fund. And we have 6 school sites, 7 if you count Favor. So that's what we have to work with. And the $300,000 number right there, routine maintenance, that includes supplies and items, paper towels, toilet paper, things that you have to operate the building. We have a $225,000 that we hold back for emergencies. Notice I mentioned that we have to be reactive, not proactive. Okay, an example of an emergency that happened after the last bond issue failed. We had heaters go out at Fogarty. First really, really cold days of the year, and the heaters failed. Well, the question can be said, okay, why weren't we taking better care of the heaters? Well, the heaters were put in 1996 at Cotterell, the junior high, Central, and Fogarty. The heat and air was placed in there at that time in 1996. There's been no plan to be proactive to replace those units before they expire. And so we're forced to replace those units when they go out. Again, reactive versus proactive. The next part, we reserve about $115,000 to do some things annually in a classrooms that, such as flooring, or we had bleachers that were prone to falling over on students, which is really not a good thing, and so we replaced those in the high school gym. So that's every year we look to that. We replace flooring in Guess and Central over the last 3 years out of that amount of money. So that's the building fund. Then you look at the general fund. And this is our big budget. This is what we operate the school with. And you can see 84% are tied up in salaries. And that's actually a low figure for an average school district. And then 10% are in fixed operating costs. Those are such as utilities, cost of insurance, the things that we have to have in order to keep the doors open. And so what you're left with is 6% of that budget that is discretionary. And when we say discretionary, that can mean instructional supplies, that can mean paper, that can mean software for a certain classroom, all kinds of things like that. And so there's not a spot in there to build a school, and there's not a realistic spot when you see the estimates to perform the kind of work that our buildings need. So we look at bond issues, and they require a supermajority to pass, 60% yes vote. If you looked at that chart that I had up there a moment ago from 2005, most of those bond issues had a simple majority, but they didn't have a supermajority. And that's required in order to pass a bond issue in the state of Oklahoma. It's funded through your property tax. You can bond up to 10% of the value of all taxable property within the district. So in other words, if you look at the value of all of the property within our district, what I call our credit limit is 10% of that, which is roughly $13 million as it stands today. And that figure fluctuates based on what the assessor assesses our property at. We can vote for bonds that exceed 10%, but we can never exceed that credit limit. So we can have one vote that authorizes more than 10%, but we have to pay some of that back before we can do the other projects. And that is a series bond, what I described right there. And so when you see bonds that are voted in an amount that exceeds bonding capacity, issued in a series so bonding capacity becomes available. And we never exceed that credit limit. Okay, this is what our surrounding districts look like. Okay, when you look at districts that surround Guthrie, and all of these districts in one form or fashion touch our district boundary line. Deer Creek has MAPS plus 35 mills. They get MAPS money. Edmond, MAPS plus 24 mills. Crescent, they have 18 mills. Coyle, 13 mills. Cashion, 16 mills. Cashion's actually running a bond issue the same time we are as well. So that would go up unless they're expiring, and I'm not sure where they are on that. Oklahoma City, MAPS plus 18.26. Luther, MAPS plus 14. Mulhall, Orlando, 5.29. Mulhall, Orlando was the benefactor of a tornado, as you guys know, and got the majority of their school buildings replaced through an insurance policy. So, and they're not growing, so you can see, but they still have outstanding debt. They still have work that they've passed bond issues for above and beyond what their building fund provides. And then you can see where Guthrie is right now. And it's been that way since 2012 when the bond issue expired. Now, if we pass this bond issue, this is where we would be. Now, full disclosure, the names over here have changed somewhat. They're not the same names. But there is a common thread among all the districts that are listed here that, and it's not geographical because Stillwater is kind of an outlier in there. What's the common thread among all of those districts listed in that chart? Growth. Those districts are growing. We're among those. The districts listed are close to us in proximity and are showing growth. And that is the amount their community has dedicated to address their growth, in addition to what they are constitutionally provided through the state of Oklahoma with ad valorem tax. So when you look at where we would be versus all of these districts right here, you can see that we're still going to be well below that. This is another interesting statistic that I ran into. In Class 5A and 6A, there is one school district in the state of Oklahoma that does not have an additional funding stream other than building fund and general fund to run their school district. And that is Guthrie. When I gave this the presentation before the last bond issue, it was a little bit different because McAllister was in the club with us. They had not passed a bond issue. They were at 0 on their sinking fund millage. Since then, McAllister has passed a bond issue for $500,000 worth of transportation, and they had a $2.2 million bond issue go down. And it went down by 1 vote. That was in February. That was for safety and security in the school buildings. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, regardless of how you feel about the bond issues or the elections, I just always tell everybody, ask the people in McAllister if their vote matters, because obviously it does. Will your taxes go up? And the answer is yes. In 2012, our debt expired. We're down to 0 on our sinking fund. There is no way to do the work we need to do without raising our taxes. And so how much? Well, if you have a $100,000 home, we estimate the taxes to increase about $1,306 per month. $150,000 home, increase $2,024 per month. We have sheets that I believe we've handed out to a lot of people in the audience that detail in $25,000 increments what that will be. And let me be very clear. Those don't stack on top of each other. There's a nasty little Facebook rumor going around today that they do. They don't stack on top of each other. Each year, that's how much it is over what you're paying today. Don't add them together. What's in that column, and I have John Wolf here from Municipal Finance Services that can attest to that. If somebody had a Bible, he'd probably swear on it. Hope. That nasty little rumor, that's misinformation to divide this community. That's all it is. Because it's not true. And that came out this afternoon. So don't stack that on top of each other. But the other thing I'm going to tell you is, you're going to hear a percentage, and I'll tell you what the percentage is, 20%. You're going to hear your taxes will go up 20%. That's about right, because they're at zero right now. Don't think about the percentage, look at the amount. Look at the amount. And that's why I made sure that that sheet has $25,000 increments so that you can look at where you stand and see how it's going to affect you. Remember, is it a cost or an investment? Cost or an investment? How much? Target increase, 15 mills, still below Edmond and Deer Creek, who also receive MAPS money. Below the 2005 bond issue. The only school district in 5A and 6A, of the 45 largest school districts in the state of Oklahoma, the only one without an additional funding source. By the way, McAllister's running that bond issue again on May 12th. Be interesting to see how that goes too. Our school buildings are in all kinds of different degrees of disrepair. That's nobody's fault. That's the reality of wear and tear on your buildings. If we were a proactive district, the discussion we would be having tonight would be about renovating Guess. Because Guess was built in 1989. It's the newest school building that we have, and it's starting to show its age with its heat and air systems, and one other thing that's going to be on here, which is their roof. We would be talking about a total renovation of that building, infrastructure-wise. Not because it was poorly built, but because it's time. But we can't have that discussion because we have more pressing needs. Our buses, we've had transportation nightmares. The buses that we've had on the road, and we did a lot of work with our transportation fleet last year. The vast majority of the buses we had on the road as of last year were 2002 models. We still have a few of those, but we have purchased used buses, and we've been able to buy more buses by being able to by purchasing them used. And we're trying to address that outside of a bond issue because the needs of a roof over a kid's head is greater, in our opinion. And we've about accomplished that with what we've been trying to do through our purchasing. And I want to credit Dennis Schultz for, he is the financial person for the district, and he's been here through several different superintendents, but does a wonderful job of hiding money from me. That sometimes irritates me when he comes in and says, well, I think we can do this. And I say, where did you find that money? That's because we've been good stewards with our money. That's the reality. Okay, technology. The computers that we have, that our students get to touch, are purchased used when Edmond Public Schools deems them obsolete. That's when they're 5 years old. And we purchase those used from them. Because again, we've not had a plan. We continue to increase enrollment. The city population is stable, but the county population continues to grow. And we've got to address that at some point. We have more students that live outside the city limits than live inside. We've been buying stuff until this last year. We've been buying stuff on lease purchases because that was all we could afford. I've said this before, it costs a lot to be poor. It costs a lot to be poor. And that's where we have been. We've tried to stop the lease purchases. But again, when you're reactive instead of proactive, you have no other choice to provide your services. Right now, construction is at a prime time to be doing this. The interest rates are very low. if you go to the polls and see the ballot, it's going to say the cap on the interest rate is 10%. The reality is the interest rate that we will receive if we get this passed will be around 1%. That's what we would expect. Accurate?
On the first series of bonds.
Yeah. You know interest rates are going to go up. That's why you're trying to, he's hedging his bets because he knows interest rates will go up, just like any financial guy will tell you that. So what are we talking about? What are we going to do? Well, the first phase is going to look very similar to what we talked about in November. Okay, and if you're sitting there and you're kind of, you didn't like what we were talking about in November, you're going, well, why are you bringing the same things back to us? The needs are still there. The needs didn't go away. Central Elementary. This is a building that was built in 1929, and we want to replace the roof. We want to replace the windows. It has single pane windows in it. We want to tuck point the exterior, seal up the brick, replace the heat and air units in there. You know, we had all the problems with Fogarty, but actually Central has the least reliable heat and air system. And so that's why we wanted to address that. $683,000, what our estimate is. Fogarty, built in 1937, a WPA building. Replace the roof, $360,000. Upper Elementary, built in 1989, again, our newest school building. Replace the roof. It's got the original roof on it from 1989. Almost $1 million to replace that roof. It's a large building with a large footprint and has a large roof. Phase 2, a new elementary school. And this is the site plan. We've even left room in there for a future addition. This is Charter Oak, and the land that we purchased is approximately 850 feet east of Douglas Boulevard, and it's on Charter Oak. This is a floor plan of what the building would look like. It has, I believe, 25 classrooms. Some of those would be specials like music and things like that. Again, the goal here is to get rid of the portable buildings, which are incredibly inefficient, unsafe, and we make kids go in and out of them. In this day and age of trying to keep everybody secure, having a portable building outside with an outside entrance is a very dangerous situation. Okay, this is the area that we're talking about. And, you know, I've heard people want to know, why would we build something down there? Why? That's a long ways from town. Sweetwater Springs, we had a visual of that, about 300 homes. Charter Oak Hills, about 200 homes. This all came from the developer. I've talked to the developer of all these neighborhoods. Whisper Glen, approximately 100 homes. Woodland Farms, 85 homes. A new development that started about 2-3 weeks ago. He's platted it out for 110 homes. And this right here is this represents the 25 acres that we purchased. I'll give you a landmark. The Lazy E, of course, is right here, and you see where I-35 is. Okay. And our school district boundary zigzags around. I didn't draw it, don't blame me. Zigzags around off of Waterloo Road. We don't go south of Waterloo Road, but within a half mile, we pretty much follow Waterloo Road all the way east of I-35 to almost Hiawassee. It's the area of greatest student growth and greatest growth potential. We have, and Terry mentioned this, right now, 470 kids, kindergarten through 5th grade, that live south of Seward Road. And we built the school is designed for 500, but it's expandable. So if we want to expand it, we can build onto it. We already own the land. And I had somebody say, well, why did you spend $250,000 on that land? Well, $250,000 on that land wouldn't get us a roof on Fogarty. And that land is only going to appreciate. If you've driven down through there, and when you look at where our kids are, that was the perfect place for a school. And again, our goal, reduce the length of bus rides, transportation costs, but the other part of this is improve parental involvement. We did a climate survey of our district last spring. And the number one thing that our faculty and staff said we needed to improve on as a district was parental involvement. And I have, and I'm looking at we've got a few retired administrators from this district in the audience, and I'm thinking, I wonder if they thought this. The way we're laid out is a barrier for parental involvement. And the way we're laid out with our grade centers is a barrier for passing bond issues. If you had a child or a grandchild that was going to be in our worst school for 6 years, would you be motivated to help the school district find a way to make that improved, whether it was through building a new one, renovating it, or whatever? My answer is, I'm betting you would be. But if they're only there for 2 years and then they move on to a building that's better, you forget about it. You forget about it, you move on, because that's what parents do. I understand that. You move on with your life. But if you had 6 years in that building with your child, in that building that is realistically unacceptable, you would be motivated to make sure that this community answered that question. The length of bus rides. Why are they that long? I'll answer your question. They're that long because that's where our kids are, and when we pick up all of those kids and then bring them to town and they've got to make 6 stops and fight through the traffic once they get here, that's what we've got. Estimated cost of that school, $11.4 million. Phase 3. Projects to begin in late 2017. Junior high, phase 1 renovations, closing the envelope. The junior high was built in 1924. And the thing that I figured out about our junior high is people are passionate about that building one way or another. There's a group of people that I think if we spent a dime on that, they believe it was money poorly spent. There's a group of people that I believe in this community, if they thought the wrecking ball was coming to that building, would chain themselves to the front steps and say, not my high school. I appreciate all that. And that's why we asked our architect, who didn't have a dog in the hunt, to go through this building, do a feasibility study, tell us what should we do with this building. Should we continue to use it as a school? Or should we mothball it? Should we see if someone will take this thing from us? If we mothball it and hold on to it, we know what happens to those buildings in this town. We don't want that for our schools. So what was the conclusion? The conclusion was the building needs a lot of work, but it is still money better spent to renovate that building with all of the functions that are contained in that building than it would be to take a new site and replicate all of those functions. And they did that. They were completely agnostic to it. They didn't care one way or another. They're trying to deal with the facts. And this is a lot more than just walking through with a clipboard. We had structural engineers look at the building. We had electrical engineers look at the building. The report, it's on our website. It's under the bond issue information. It's about 45 pages. And it is in depth about their recommendations. And so we've had an independent third party with no emotion tell us it is worthwhile to save that building. And so what we want to do is we want to begin work on saving that building. and tuck point the exterior, waterproofing, energy efficient windows along the north side of the building. About $750,000 what that's going to cost. That's just on the north side. Now at the high school. Built in 1967. Okay, how many of you think of it as a new high school? Just hold up your hands. Go ahead and admit it. Go ahead. It's all right. It's all right. Okay, that new high school was built the year I was born. Okay? Well, actually, I was born in 68, so it's a year older. The new high school is not so new anymore, folks. This item has been on bond issues multiple times that have failed. This is, and Jerry Ball he's been, since he's retired, I've kind of been asking him and quizzing him, and we got Jerry Gamble back here. That's generations of facility management for our district. But this is the original stuff that runs our heat and air for that building. And you can maintain, but even I have to get an operation every once in a while. And that's where we are with that building. And that's where we are with the heat and air. $1.3 million it's going to take to fix that heat and air. Some of this is we're in this position because some of it was done poorly when we reconfigured the buildings. We have taken spaces that were common spaces and we have put walls there. We have done a lot of work to that building and never taken care properly of the heat and air system. Okay, then we're going to get to technology. Video security, improvements at all school sites. Adding cameras. We want to add cameras wherever we can, especially at entrances to buildings, so that we have a record of when someone walks in and walks out of our building. All of our buildings are secure in the sense that we have ID cards that you have to swipe to get in now, or we have a camera out there at the entrances where a secretary can look at that and make the decision to let someone in or not. But we want the additional safety there and also to monitor our students. Network upgrades to our current system. Even those $5 computers that we get from Edmond need to have a network to operate on. And we are in need of upgrading that. And then we want to begin to address the computers that we have that are purchased from Edmond and start getting into new computers that are under warranty, which ease some of the pressure on our technology staff. $500,000. There is a summary of the estimates that I went through. Now let's talk about one plan, one purpose, one district. When we rolled out the last bond package, I heard, you're just putting Band-Aids on this stuff. You're just putting things out there, and we're not really taking care of what we need to. We're not addressing the elephant in the room, which is our growth in southern Logan County. We're not addressing all this stuff. This addresses a lot of that stuff. But it starts a plan where we can begin to be proactive. We've talked a lot about, well, if this were just on there, I'd support it. Or if this were just on there, I'd support it. Well, good luck on ever getting the community together where everyone supports it 100%, because that requires compromise. And passionate people sometimes lose sight of when compromise is necessary. One purpose. Do schools, the condition of schools, make a difference in education? Environment matters. And here's what I say to that. You can have the best teacher in the world and they can do a great job, but nothing speaks better to the commitment a community gives to education than how their facilities look. Nothing speaks better. And the commitment to education in this community has not shown. When I get asked by a student, why doesn't the community support us? I need somebody to give me an answer. Is it because you thought one thing on the bond issue wasn't good? Now, the next part of this, one district. Janae touched on this, Ms. Pearson. Since I came to town, I've heard South County, Guthrie proper, suburban growth, all this stuff. It shouldn't matter where a kid lives to receive an education. Shouldn't matter. Our job and the community's responsibility is to provide an education for our students. Cost versus investment. And it shouldn't matter where they live, they should have the same opportunity to be successful in the classroom. And addressing that is a responsibility of this community.